4 men trapped her in the stable. Then a ranch cowboy walked in, and everything went silent. Part 1. The Quiet Before the Storm. The sun was slowly setting over the wide ranch, painting the sky in soft orange and pink colors. The air was calm, and a gentle breeze moved through the dry grass. It looked like a peaceful evening, but something didn't feel right. Elena Carter walked quickly across the yard, holding a small lantern in her hand. She wanted to finish her work before it got too dark. The ranch had been strange for the past few days. New faces had been seen around, and people were whispering more than usual. Even the animals seemed uneasy. Elena reached the stable and pushed the wooden door open. It made a long, creaking sound. Inside, the smell of hay and horses filled the air. Usually, this place made her feel calm, but today it felt different, too quiet, too still. She walked toward the horses, softly speaking to them as she checked their food and water. One of the horses moved nervously, tapping its hoof against the ground. Elena paused. "Easy now," she said gently, trying to calm it. But deep inside, she felt the same nervousness. Just as she turned to leave, she heard a sound behind her. The stable door shut. Slowly. Elena froze. Her heart began to beat faster as she turned around. Standing near the door were 4 men she had never seen before. They were not from the ranch. Their clothes were dusty from travel, and their faces were serious. None of them smiled. For a moment, no one spoke. Elena tried to stay calm. "Can I help you?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, with sharp eyes that looked at everything carefully. "We're just looking for some answers," he said quietly. Elena held the lantern a little tighter. "This is private property," she replied. "You should speak to the ranch owner." Another man moved closer, blocking the side exit. "We're not here for him," he said. "We're here for information." The air inside the stable felt heavy. Elena realized she was surrounded. The horses shifted again, sensing the tension. "What kind of information?" she asked, trying not to show fear. The tall man looked around the stable before answering. "Something important. Something that belongs here." Elena shook her head slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." The men exchanged quick glances. It was clear they didn't fully believe her, but they were not shouting or acting wild. Their calm behavior made the situation feel even more serious. One of them spoke again, this time more softly. "We're not here to cause trouble. We just need to know where it is." Elena took a small step back, thinking carefully. She didn't know exactly what they wanted, but she understood one thing. They believed she had answers. "I really don't know anything," she said honestly. The tall man studied her face, trying to see if she was telling the truth. The silence grew longer. Even the sound of the wind outside seemed to disappear. For a moment, Elena wondered if anyone else on the ranch had noticed something was wrong. The stable was a little far from the main house. If no one came, she would have to handle this alone. Then, something strange happened. The men stopped asking questions. Instead, they simply stood there, watching her. It was as if they were waiting, not for her answer, but for something else. Elena felt a chill run through her. "Why are you really here?" she asked, her voice softer now. The tall man didn't answer. He just turned his head slightly, toward the door. Elena followed his gaze. At first, she heard nothing. Then, footsteps. Slow, steady, getting closer. The stable door opened again with a soft creak. A man stepped inside. He wore a simple cowboy hat, and his clothes were dusty from a long day's work. He didn't look in a hurry. He didn't look worried. It was Caleb Hayes. He paused just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. Then he looked around the stable, taking in everything: the 4 men, Elena, the silence. No one spoke. The air changed in an instant. The same men who had been in control just moments ago now stood still, unsure. Their confident expressions slowly faded. Something about Caleb's presence made them careful. Caleb said nothing at first. He simply walked a few steps forward, calm and steady. Elena felt her fear begin to fade, replaced by something else: relief. The tall man straightened slightly, as if preparing to speak again. But the words didn't come, because suddenly, everything went silent. Part 2. The Cowboy Who Changed the Room. The stable was quiet, but it was not the same kind of quiet as before. This silence felt different, strong, heavy, and full of meaning. Caleb Hayes stood near the door, his boots still dusty from the ranch fields. He did not rush. He did not look angry. He simply stood there, calm and steady, as if he had walked into an ordinary moment. But nothing about this moment was ordinary. Elena watched him closely. She had seen Caleb many times before. He was known as a quiet worker, someone who kept to himself and spoke only when needed. But today, there was something more in his eyes, something sharp and aware. The 4 men noticed it too. The tall man, who had been leading the group, cleared his throat. "We didn't mean to disturb anything," he said, trying to sound relaxed. Caleb took a few slow steps forward. His eyes moved from one man to another, studying them carefully. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he gently placed his hat on a nearby wooden post. "I don't think this is your place," Caleb said finally, his voice low and calm. The men exchanged glances again. The one near the side exit shifted his weight, as if unsure whether to stay or leave. "We're just asking questions," another man said. "Nothing wrong with that." Caleb nodded slightly, as if he understood. "Questions are fine," he replied, "but there's a right way to ask them." Elena noticed how his tone stayed steady. He was not accusing them. He was not raising his voice, but somehow his words carried weight. The tall man stepped forward again, trying to take control. "Maybe you can help us then," he said. "We're looking for something important, something connected to this ranch." Caleb looked at him without fear. "I figured as much," he said quietly. That answer surprised everyone, especially Elena. The men became more alert. "So you know about it?" the tall man asked. Caleb did not answer directly. Instead, he walked a little further into the stable, stopping beside one of the horses. He gently placed his hand on the horse's neck, calming it. "You've come a long way," Caleb said. "But I think you've come with the wrong idea." The men frowned. "What does that mean?" one of them asked. Caleb looked back at them. "It means," he said slowly, "that what you're looking for isn't as simple as you think." The stable grew quiet again. The wind outside brushed softly against the wooden walls. Elena felt her breathing become easier. She didn't fully understand what Caleb was doing, but she could see it working. The men were no longer in control. They were listening. The tall man crossed his arms. "Then maybe you should explain," he said. Caleb gave a small nod. "Maybe I should," he replied. He stepped closer, now standing between Elena and the 4 men, not in a protective way that looked obvious, but in a natural, steady position. "You're chasing something that belongs to the past," Caleb continued, "something tied to old decisions and old mistakes." The men looked confused now. "We don't care about the past," one of them said. "We care about what it leads to." Caleb's expression didn't change. "And that's exactly the problem," he said. Elena watched the tall man carefully. His confidence was fading. He looked less sure of himself now, like someone trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces. "You're saying we're wrong?" the tall man asked. "I'm saying," Caleb replied, "you don't have the full story." There was a pause. Then, for the first time, one of the men took a small step back. It was a small movement, but it meant something. The balance in the room had shifted. Elena felt it clearly now. The fear that had filled the stable earlier was slowly disappearing. In its place was something calmer, something controlled. The tall man let out a slow breath. "Then tell us the story," he said. Caleb looked at him for a moment, as if deciding how much to say. "You're looking for papers," Caleb said finally. "Land papers, Ownership records. The men went still. Elena's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't known exactly what they wanted before, but now it was clear. The tall man didn't deny it. "And if we are?" he asked. Caleb gave a small, almost unnoticeable smile. "Then you're not the first," he said. The men looked at each other again, this time more seriously. "What does that mean?" one of them asked. "It means others have come before you," Caleb explained, "and they all made the same mistake." "And what mistake is that?" the tall man asked. Caleb stepped a little closer, his voice still calm. "They thought force or pressure would give them answers," he said, "but this place doesn't work that way." The stable became completely still again. Even the horses were quiet now. The tall man lowered his arms slowly. His sharp expression softened into something more thoughtful. Elena realized something important in that moment. Caleb wasn't just talking to them. He was guiding them. Without anger, without fear, just quiet control. And for the first time since they arrived, the four men didn't look like a threat anymore. They looked like men who were starting to understand they had stepped into the wrong place. Part 3. Truth Beneath the Dust. The stable remained quiet, but now the silence felt calmer, almost thoughtful. The fear that once filled the air had slowly faded. In its place was curiosity and careful attention. Caleb Hayes stood still, his presence steady like a strong tree in the wind. The four men were no longer blocking the exits. Instead, they stood in a loose group, listening. Elena stayed near the horses, watching everything closely. She could feel that something important was about to be revealed. The tall man looked at Caleb again. "You said others came before us," he said. "What happened to them?" Caleb took a slow breath before answering. "They asked the wrong questions," he said, "and they didn't stay long enough to hear the truth." One of the men frowned. "Then tell us the truth," he said. Caleb nodded slightly. "All right," he replied, "but you need to listen carefully." The men grew quiet again. "This ranch," Caleb began, "is not just land. It carries history. Years ago, the ownership of this place was not clear. There were disagreements, confusion, and missing records." Elena listened closely. She had worked on the ranch for a long time, but she had never heard this story before. Caleb continued. "People believed there were documents, papers that could prove full ownership. Many came searching for them, thinking those papers would give them control." The tall man's eyes sharpened. "And those papers exist, don't they?" he asked. Caleb looked at him calmly. "Yes," he said. The men leaned in slightly. "But," Caleb added, "they are not what you think." That answer confused them. "What do you mean?" another man asked. Caleb walked slowly across the stable, his boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. He stopped near a small window where the last light of the sunset came through. "Those papers don't give power," he explained. "They only tell a story. A story about how this land was meant to be cared for, not owned in the way you think." The men exchanged uncertain looks. "That doesn't make sense," one of them said. "Land papers always mean ownership." Caleb shook his head slightly. "Not here," he replied. Elena noticed how calm he remained. He was not trying to win an argument. He was simply sharing something deeper. The tall man stepped forward again, but this time his voice was less firm. "Then why hide them?" he asked. Caleb looked at him carefully. "They weren't hidden," he said. "They were protected." "Protected from who?" the man asked. "From people who only see value in control," Caleb answered. The words hung in the air. Elena could see the change in the men's faces. They were no longer acting like they had all the answers. Instead, they looked like they were trying to understand something new. One of the men spoke softly. "So, we came here for nothing?" Caleb gave a small shake of his head. "Not nothing," he said. "You came here for a reason, but maybe not the reason you thought." The stable felt lighter now. The tight feeling from before was completely gone. The tall man looked around the stable, the horses, the hay, the quiet space. Then he looked back at Caleb. "If these papers don't give control," he said slowly, "then why do people keep searching for them?" Caleb gave a faint smile. "Because people often believe that having something gives them power," he said. "But real strength doesn't come from owning land. It comes from understanding it and respecting it." Elena felt those words deeply. She had always loved the ranch, but she had never thought about it that way before. The tall man lowered his gaze for a moment. It seemed like he was thinking hard. "So, what happens now?" he asked. Caleb stepped closer, his voice still calm and steady. "That depends on you," he said. "You can keep chasing something that won't give you what you want, or you can walk away with a better understanding." The men stood silently. No one argued. No one pushed forward. After a long moment, one of the men quietly said, "Maybe we misunderstood." Another nodded slightly. The tall man looked at his companions, then back at Caleb. His sharp expression was gone now. In its place was something more respectful. "We didn't mean to cause trouble," he said. Caleb gave a small nod. "I know," he replied. Elena felt a sense of relief wash over her. The situation that had once felt dangerous was now calm and under control. The wind outside picked up slightly, brushing against the stable walls. The moment felt like a turning point. The men were no longer searching, they were deciding. And deep down, Elena knew. They were starting to see the truth beneath the dust. Part 4. Silence, then departure. The stables stood quiet under the soft light of the evening. The last colors of the sunset slowly faded, and the sky outside turned darker. A cool breeze passed through the small gaps in the wooden walls. Inside, no one spoke for a few moments. The four men stood still, no longer tense, no longer demanding. Their earlier confidence had changed into something calmer, something thoughtful. Caleb Hayes remained steady, his posture relaxed but strong. He did not rush them. He did not push them to decide. He simply waited. Elena watched closely. Her hands were no longer shaking. The fear she had felt before was gone. In its place was quiet curiosity. The tall man finally broke the silence. "We came here thinking we understood everything," he said slowly. "But now, it feels like we understood nothing." Caleb gave a small nod. "That happens sometimes," he replied. "The truth isn't always where people expect it to be." One of the other men looked around the stable again. The horses, the tools, the simple life of the ranch. "This place," he said quietly. "It feels different now." Elena noticed that too. The same stable that had felt trapped and heavy before now felt open and calm. The tall man took a deep breath. "We don't want any trouble," he said. "We never did." Caleb looked at him with a steady gaze. "Then you already know what to do," he said. The man nodded slowly. There was no argument, no hesitation. One by one, the four men stepped back from where they stood. The man near the side exit moved away first, giving space. Another walked toward the main door and gently opened it. The door creaked again, but this time the sound felt lighter. Before leaving, the tall man paused. He turned back toward Caleb and Elena. "For what it's worth," he said, "thank you for explaining things." Caleb gave a simple nod. "Take care of your path," he replied. The man gave a small, respectful look, then stepped outside. The others followed him. Their footsteps faded slowly into the distance. And just like that, they were gone. The stable became completely still again. Only the soft breathing of the horses and the quiet sound of the wind remained. Elena let out a long breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She placed the lantern down on a wooden shelf and looked at Caleb. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she finally asked. Caleb picked up his hat and brushed a little dust off it before placing it back on his head. I had a feeling, he said simply. Elena stepped a little closer. But how did you stay so calm? She asked. I thought things were going to go very wrong. Caleb looked around the stable for a moment before answering. Sometimes, he said, people don't need force to change. They just need to be shown a different way to see things. Elena thought about his words. You didn't fight them, she said. You didn't even argue. Caleb gave a faint smile. Not every problem needs a fight, he replied. Some problems just need patience. The stable felt peaceful now. Outside, the stars had begun to appear in the night sky. Elena looked toward the open door where the men had left. Do you think they'll come back? She asked. Caleb shook his head slightly. No, he said. They found what they needed. Elena raised an eyebrow. But they didn't find the papers, she said. Caleb glanced at her. Sometimes, he said, understanding is more important than finding something. Elena smiled softly. She understood now. The ranch was more than land. It was a place built on trust, care, and quiet strength. And Caleb had protected it, not with force, but with wisdom. After a moment, Caleb turned toward the horses. We should finish up here, he said. They still need their evening care. Elena nodded. Right, she said, picking up the lantern again. They moved through the stable, checking each horse, making sure everything was in place. The work felt normal again, simple and calm. But something had changed. Elena no longer saw Caleb as just a quiet cowboy. She saw him as someone who carried a deep understanding, someone who could bring calm into chaos without raising his voice. As they finished their work, Caleb walked toward the door. He paused for a moment, looking out into the dark ranch land. Everything was quiet, peaceful, safe. He tipped his hat slightly, as if acknowledging the stillness, then stepped outside. Elena followed him, closing the stable door behind them. The ranch returned to its calm evening rhythm. And from that day on, whenever the wind passed through the fields and the stable stood under the open sky, it carried a quiet reminder that true strength does not need noise. Sometimes it only needs presence.